She's one of the hottest radio personalities in the country, unafraid to ask the tough questions, informed, engaged, and in touch with what's happening in your neighborhood, across the country, and around the world. Frankie has a big mouth with big name guests, big topics, big ideas, and solutions. Now, here's your host, Frankie Darcell.
And hello, and welcome to Frankie Has a Big Mouth. Yeah, I know everybody loves that title, but we tackle big issues. And of course, my great big guests that join us to talk about those issues important to you each and every week. So make sure that you check it out on the iHeartRadio network, Black Information Network, and of course, our incredible partners at Real Times Media. I'm so excited to have as my guest once again, one of the premier attorneys out of the state of Pennsylvania, Tracie Burns. Thank you, Tracie. Always good to have you on the show.
Hey, Frankie, so good to see you, and I'm always happy to be here with you.
Thank you so much. He is a political consultant, former military guy as well, and represented the union serving as leadership with the union and the postal service as well. Duron Marshall, good to have you with us.
Hey, good to be with you and your amazing guests. Another wonderful day, Frankie.
Good. Listen, he is, if you know anything about the great state of Pennsylvania and the city of Philadelphia, he has been an activist for a number of years. He's celebrating a birthday coming up in the next couple of days. We definitely want to celebrate him with that. And he is on the ground, always has been, just a stalwart for this community, Black folk in particular, to do better. And of course, if you can see to his left shoulder, that incredible art, he is a fine artist as well, Bilal Qayyum. First time on Frankie Has a Big Mouth, will not be the last time. He's been on the radio show a number of times. Bilal, welcome to Frankie Has a Big Mouth. How are you?
Great, and I'm happy to join you.
Thank you. Can you, before we get started, can you talk about that art piece to your left shoulder?
Yeah, I actually studied art when I was in high school. Oak High School in the city of Philadelphia, and I got away from art when I went to college and really got involved in the Black Power and Civil Rights movement. And when I was home 2 years ago because of the pandemic, I took it very seriously. And you do the Zooms, you do reading, television, all that. I just got bored, and one day I literally picked up the paintbrush. I had some paint and a couple of canvas. I picked up the paintbrush. I started painting again after 34 years since I did my painting, and I can't stop now. I just enjoy painting now, and it's also a stress remover for me. Work I'm doing, I got to get out or take some time, and what I do is just get in my little studio and I just start painting.
Well, listen, happy birthday to you.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome very much. All right, let's get started. We're just about we're within the 30-day window of the election. Duron, I'm going to start with you. What's driving people? Very important election coming up around the country as well. When you look at the Senate races in states like Georgia, Pennsylvania, it is a number of Michigan, Virginia, a number of key issues. One of the biggest key issues is abortion. And do you think, as we get ready to get into our topic, talking about young people and gun violence, do you believe that the abortion issue is one of the issues that's going to drive people to the polls?
Well, Frankie, this is a great place to start because just as our guest spoke about in terms of, Black empowerment, in terms of the community, normally there has to be a reason to drive people to the polls. I believe the abortion issue may be one of the top. It has polled as one of the top issues. Affecting even some of those Republican stronghold areas where they had normally expected to wipe out their Democratic opponent using other measures. We would hope that November 8th is a backlash to the withdrawing of rights in this country. We've been here before. Remember, women lost the right to vote in 1950. So we're not going to act like we haven't lost rights before, but we fought back. Hopefully this will be a time that all the country fights back. But Frankie, these races are close. Some thought the Georgia race would be, that Pastor Warnock would be way ahead of Herschel Walker, but with all the snafu's and shenanigans that Herschel Walker has thrown out, but that's not the case. They're neck and neck. On some days, Herschel's ahead. So it's going to be a tight race to the wire. And it looks like the Senate, hopefully it won't be 50-50, that it can be 51, at least 49. We can govern better. And
you mean in terms of the Democrats being ahead?
Yes, the Democrats being ahead. Yes,
the assumption that you would believe that Democrats should be ahead.
Because now, Frank, it's 50-50. And so although people believe the Democrats are in charge, the Democrats only win a 50-50 vote when the vice president comes and sits in the Senate seat, because the vice president is the president of the Senate. And only under that scenario do we actually are able to move. But this 50-50 puts a lot of pressure on conservative Democrats like Joe Manchin.
Who's really a Republican. Okay, there, I said it.
Yes. Well, he's a Democrat. But look, just like during the healthcare debate when President Obama was in place, we lost a lot of blue dogs, that along the country because they were in moderate seats. And Democrats need to win in moderate seats as well. They just can't win in a stronghold. Mm-hmm. So hopefully this election rounds out. But it's hard to tell the motivation of the people, and it's hard to tell if the people will take to the street, particularly in light of the weather changes that are happening around the country. Yeah. What are the turnouts going to be like in the southern areas like South Carolina, experiencing, I just want to give a prayer to all of the people in South Carolina, all the people in Florida and Georgia who are facing just devastation. But maybe we can begin as a country to begin to vote on policies that will make our lives better and stop voting on things that we have less to do about and more to be, angry and cantankerous for.
Yeah. As we move forward and talking about that, it's interesting. We can have this conversation on the radio show. You can hear me on the iHeartRadio network as well in cities around the country. But even with Governor DeSantis talking about, federal disaster relief where he thought that other states shouldn't receive it. He's asking for that money for his residents. So that's an entirely different conversation for another time. Bilal, let me start with you. You have been in the voting rights activism space for a very, very long time. What would you say to people who are watching and the importance of getting out to the polls on November 8th to make sure that they cast their vote?
Well, it is crucial, as always. The concerns I have, though, with the voting is the turnout. And it gets a little tricky. I'm getting ready to say something. I want to be clear. But
we got a big mouth here, so make it as big as you like.
You remember, Hillary Clinton did not do as well in certain areas, particularly in the Black community, I could tell you, because of her policy about abortion and stuff like that. Abortion doesn't necessarily, it's an important issue, but it doesn't ring to the Black community that is their important issue. So I do see there's going to be a definite upswing in women coming out in particularly white women because of the abortion issue. Right. I'm not sure we'll find out. I'm not sure it's going to, if it's a major issue with folks in the Black community, they're more concerned about economic stability, education, and crime. So it's going to be interesting. In Pennsylvania now, it's almost mirrors kind of what's happening in Georgia for the Senate race. Dr. Oz, if you look at some polls, he's up one day, and then Leatherman's up. Did I pronounce his last name? Fetterman is up on one poll 1 minute. Yeah. And so to me, the difference is going to be in Pennsylvania. The white Trump movement is big. They're going to come out. The difference is, will the Black community and the Latino community really come out big? And once again, they're looking for the nitty-gritty issues that are affecting us in those communities. So it's going to be interesting. It really is.
It's interesting on the back end of that as well. In polls in Virginia and in Pennsylvania, just as a footnote that I've read recently, there are white women who are Republican that are actually going to cross the ballot and are going to vote Democrat because of the abortion issue. So as we look at that Trump piece that's going on, because people would like to think that the abortion issue is only a Black woman issue. It's not. And let me just be real clear. I'm sure that there are white Republicans, their brothers, husbands, and sons that have benefited from that issue in terms of abortion, but there are white women across the state in Pennsylvania, Georgia, and other states that are actually going to vote Democrat because of that issue alone. So we'll see what happens. All right. So when we talk about those issues and moving forward, and you talked about, Bilal, issues important to the Black community in local communities across the state, whether you're talking about Georgia, whether you're talking about Pennsylvania, Virginia, California, the gun violence just seems like there's no end to what is happening with this very aggressive and consistent gun violence. What has been notable to all of us is that the ages of these, the victim and the perpetrator, are 14, 15, 16, 17 years old. We can talk about the access to guns. We've all heard the term, guns don't kill people, people kill people, but these are 14, 15, and 16-year-olds where we're hearing it so much and we're seeing it so much, it's becoming normal. As a defense attorney, Tracie, I'll start with you as we open this discussion, that the ages are getting so much younger that they have, one, access to guns and using them.
Frankie, these kids are numb. Bottom line, point blank, they are numb. So you figure your 14 or your 16-year-old shooter today has already lost 2, 3, maybe 10 friends to gun violence. And the more they see something, the more numb they become to it. It does not shock their conscience. And then we've got so many other things going on, Frankie. This is a multi-dimensional problem. It starts with, what's going on in a home? What's the environment in a home? What is happening with them in terms of education? When they are arrested because they commit what we consider a juvenile offense, we don't have any place to keep them because the instance of juvenile crime has grown faster than the juvenile justice system. Mm-hmm. We don't have any place to keep these kids. Mm-hmm. So you have kids, the juvenile justice center is already full. You have a kid who's, committed whatever offense. He comes before the judge, and because there's no place for him to go, or her, please let's not forget, there's no place for him or her to go. We send them back home, back into
how often,
the community.
Though, Tracie? But Tracie, how often are they sending home shooters?
Well, they're not necessarily sending home shooters. Now, if it was a shooter, if it was a homicide, they will hold them. Even if it was just a shooter, they will hold them. However, we are still sending home offenders. I mean, they may not have been picked up for a shooting this time, but it is clearly in them. They very well may be shooters. Now, when we get shooters, absolutely we hold shooters. And then the question becomes, Frankie, okay, if they've not committed a homicide, depending upon, what their record is, shooters don't necessarily get placement. Some shooters, some gun toters are rehabilitated from within the community. Placement is not always the first choice in terms of rehabilitation.
So I think, let me make sure that I'm clear to see if you're talking about. So it's one thing that a kid gets stopped for whatever the reason, right? He's got a gun on him and they arrest him. He has no permit to carry and the like. You're talking about that kid is the one that they're releasing.
That kid's going to go home.
That kid, and you know what? Because for the most part, he had a gun on him. He didn't use it. Even if he didn't have a CCW or whatever the term is that they
But why is the gun on him?
I get it. But we do live in the United States and there are in other states like Idaho, Texas, and some other places, they teach their kids how to shoot at 6, 7, 8. It's a constitutional right to be able to bear arms. I get that part. So
but not at 14.
Yeah, but they're teaching them how to shoot.
Not at 14 in Georgia.
Yeah, well, but they're teaching their kids how to shoot for sure, even if it's on the range. But so that's the one kid we're talking about. But we're talking about the kids who are getting their hands on the guns and in the community ready and willing to use it. Where we're talking about the kid that one is going to the cemetery or to the ICU and the other one is going to the penitentiary. Bilal, let me come to you and here. Yes. You're on the ground. You're working with leadership in your city about this issue and the fact that there are so many where they're under the age of 18.
Yes, but also in Philadelphia, and the statistics shows majority of shootings in the city of Philadelphia are individuals. Shooters are individual 18 and older, 18 to 40, 18 to 35. And Tracie, I disagree with you. I go to Youth Study Center every week. I've been in the Youth Study Center. This Thursday I was just there. And we're interacting with the young males We been in there for 3 years. And out of 3 years, we have engaged over 1,200. I can tell you most of the individuals we engage are not going home. They're going in placement. And even now, when I was in there Thursday, there are like 30 or 40 young folks there over the capacity of the center. I interacted with 9 guys in the pod. The pod is where they hold them. Out of 9 guys, every single one of them is going into placement. Now, the problem is that, like you said, they don't have nowhere to place them. Last week, I talked to a young man. He's been there for 2 years at the Youth Study Center. The guy in the next pod over from him has been there for 14 months. The guys I interacted with Thursday, they were there for at least 6, 8, 10 months. So because placement in Pennsylvania, they don't have no more spots. And unfortunately, all the placement sites in Pennsylvania are out upstate Pennsylvania. There's none in the Philadelphia area that young folks can go to. But I think that this is a national problem. Like we got to talk about it. It's a national problem. And every city, the numbers are quickly. The Census Bureau, with 13% of the population in America, Black folks, and the Census Bureau reported in 2020, 55.6% of homicide victims were Black. We're only 13% of the population. 65.6% increase in homicide over 2019.
Yeah.
So, it's and another statistic quickly, 22.9% of 100,000 individuals looking at in 2019, Blacks went from 22% of increase in homicide.
So what we're saying, we know that there's a problem, and I get it, and it's across the country, and anybody, no matter where you live in USA, this issue is a problem, specifically in communities. O'Keller, Duron, I'm going to come to you as well. The Constitution says you have a right to carry, clearly at a certain age, and what we're talking about are ghost guns, and these young people who are using them. It's a problem.
Well, I think to Dr. Bilal's point and to Tracie's point, we've allowed 13 states in this country to govern our gun policy. 13 states have what's called constitutional carry, almost undefined by the Constitution. Constitution doesn't say everyone should carry a handgun. That's just not true. When you can look, we can all look at the same text and read what we want to look in. We've allowed a conservative court to tell us that means so therefore we're going to take out the number one tool that states like Philadelphia.
Duron, here we go.
Make their population safe, which is to suppress gun use.
Listen, the guys in the community where we're talking about gun violence could give less than a flying fish about what the Constitution said about a handgun. Let's just have a conversation today about why young people who look like you, look like you are feeling so comfortable in broad daylight to shoot each other and randomly, carjacking and the like. We can talk about the Constitution. We can talk about leadership. Why are we finding this level of gun violence in Black and brown communities, and these young people have no, as Tracie talked about being numb. It is and let me be clear, because I don't want to brush a broad brush on all of our young people in the community, because that's just not the case. We've got some young men and young women living in those same challenging communities that are not resorting to gun violence. But what is it that we need to do within the community? And I'm talking about leadership across the board, be you mayor, city council member, or the like, to stop this level of gun violence. People don't want people to stop and frisk. We don't want that.
Right.
But we see the brazenness of these young people committing these crimes on people that look like them.
Well, Frankie, that was the reason I started with the constitutional carry piece. You can't really separate that because guns now are more accessible. And I started with that because it's become a national discussion about access to weapons and whatnot. So it's kind of hard to complain about, Cabrini Greens being collapsed and now everybody's together in Chicago and there's more shooting if we don't want to deal with the access to guns that are coming out of Indiana. If we don't figure out a way to suppress
See,
that.
but if I have access to the sports car, doesn't mean I'm going to get on the freeway and go over the speed limit.
That's true.
We have a mentality.
Right.
There is a blank mentality
Right.
in certain parts of the community that believes shooting and killing people is okay. Bilal. Shooting and killing them is okay. Doesn't matter. Listen, Duron, I could give you a gun. Duron, I could give you a gun. It doesn't mean you're going to use it just recklessly and randomly.
That's true. But if you create a mentality in this country where shooting becomes the main way to deal with issues and aggression, and the fallout is in the Black communities disproportionately, you can't disconnect it. So therefore, you have to look at policies. I mean, I'm saying, how do you correct the problem? I can't stop every shooter. I can't stop the condition that creates a shooter. But what I can do is try to stop the access to the weapons. But if I can't stop the access to the weapons, and I can't deal with the mental capacity of individuals to have a weapon, it's very difficult to stop the random shooting. That's just my belief.
All right, I appreciate that belief.
But what stops them from getting a knife?
I heard a rapper say, I forget his name, actually 2 weeks ago, guns is a new crack in our community. The way they flow crack in the community, they're flowing guns in our community.
I just think you guys are blaming everybody except personal responsibility.
No, I'm not.
Come on with it. Let's have the conversation. That's why we're here. We're putting the responsibility on everything and everybody except the personal responsibility of individuals. Go, Bilal.
I'm a total support of responsibility. Matter of fact, I say consistently, until the Black community takes ownership of this issue, we're not going to solve it. We're not going to solve it. We got to take ownership. It's Black folks killing Black folks. The statistics I gave you earlier. All right. But I'm also a strong believer of white institutional racism that's in this country and is in every city in this country, holding the institution itself until it's broken by racism. That is a fundamental reason. Now, saying all that, you're right, Frankie. We have to do things in our community and take responsibility in our community. Fathers got to be involved in the children's lives. Mothers got it now. The mothers have got it. They're probably the problem now. That's when you talk about these young girls committing all the crime. The young girls don't even feel the support and love from their mothers, which was a foundation support of our community over the years. We could talk about fathers all we would want, but you never talked about mom, what mom wasn't doing. But that's missing. So we got to rebuild our community, Black communities, take responsibility, or I call it say ownership of the system.
Okay, so I'm going to be the angel's advocate. I think Tracie and Duron have maybe even heard me say this before, and this is just being the angel's advocate. I never advocate for the devil. But when we, the Black community is one of the communities, Black and brown communities, where we take full responsibility for the behavior of everybody Black and brown. Anytime there's a crime committed, sometimes we look at the TV and say, oh, I hope they're not Black. Because this country has conditioned themselves to believe that so goes one, so goes us all. I'm just as outraged as anybody, white, Black, green, or otherwise. I believe it's a personal responsibility, not just for all Black folks, because all Black folks aren't doing this. All Black young kids are not doing this, right? But we take the full responsibility for the actions of someone. But as we move forward with the conversation, and Bilal, I want to come back to you as well. When you mentioned the responsibility, what responsibility then within the home, and when we talk about access and the mom, the dad, and the like, and we've talked about this before, and I think you made mention to it, of how we stop an individual who mentally believes that it is okay to get a handgun, however they retrieve it, and shoot and kill someone in the middle of the street, and in a lot of cases in broad daylight.
It's got to be long term. It's got to be long term. We don't have no quick fix solutions now, and that's what everybody's kind of looking at. Quick fix solution. It's long term. You got to be these young folks, particularly, they have been mentally destroyed about the way they think. The real solution is your mindset, how you think, and you're right. If you think it right, you have a gun, doesn't mean you got to use it, unless it's for protection. But our young folks is bombarded. They get bombarded every day by negative images, social media, the drill rap that's out there. People want to know the effect of drill rap. So our young folks are listening to music every single day that is promoting shootings, promoting death. They live in environments where they know that, Tracie said it earlier about they have 5, 6, 7 friends that have been killed. So if you're getting constantly bombarded every day with negative images of yourself, of who the community you live in, then you act that way. So we got to switch. We got to turn that around. And the only way I think, for my years involved now, to turn it around is long term. We got to start getting at the younger children at a younger age and teaching them conflict resolutions and how to resolve problems.
Right.
So that's, but people are looking for these quick fixes. It isn't no quick
fix. But here's one. Just I wanted to pitch this to you guys and see if you could hit this one out of the park. I'd love to hear it. And Tracie, I'll start with you. Part of it is that these are folks, sons, nephews, husbands, booze, well, whatever word you want to use it, until the leadership creates an opportunity for people to be able to live in the community and say, James across the street did it. So and so. Because they know there are people in the community who know who these shooters are. But people are afraid, one, that whole snitching thing, right? Which some people, even politically, Duron, when they say, you know, I have a right to remain silent, not to self-incriminate myself, it's the same thing. White collar, don't snitch in the community. But if there were, here's a question for you guys. If there were safeguards in the communities where people could feel comfortable saying, this is who did it, this is where they did it, at least the current shooters we could get off the street. Do you believe that?
You know, Frankie,
No, Frankie, there is no such safeguard.
No, I know there's not a safeguard, but do you believe if there were safeguards? Because there's an opportunity if people would just speak up, because people in the community, people in the neighborhood know who's doing what. If there were safeguards, because that might need to be a part of the conversation. Part of the conversation about how do we deal with this issue is giving people who have information to individuals that commit these crimes. I'm just asking the question, do you think, at least for the current shooters that are out there, and some of them when they're arrested, you find they've been involved in 3 and 4 and 5 different shootings. Do you think that's one area that could address this issue?
Frankie, if people felt safer, certainly they would. If they felt safer, they absolutely positively would probably give more thought to coming forward and offering law enforcement information when they see a crime. Right now, we've got witness protection. You know, you can be relocated. Most local governments, most local district attorney's offices have funds that can be used to relocate families when we're talking about doing these kinds of cooperation and coming forward with information. Most people don't want to do it, though. Most people don't want to do it. You know, they are comfortable. They're in their home. They don't want to relocate. I know people who have been relocated and their entire families have been moved because they cooperated with the prosecution of a serious offense. And those people came back to the very community that they feared because they couldn't handle being away from it. So there's a whole mentality that goes along with that. But, you know, right now, how we are solving crimes right now is because of cameras. The police have cameras. Cameras are up on red lights. The insurance company cameras. I think it was something insurance companies originally put the cameras up because they were trying to follow up on all the stolen cars. And then, you know, law enforcement says, hey, wait a minute. They're catching these crimes on their insurance cameras. Let's put some cameras up. They put the cameras up. I know for a fact that in our little city of Chester, we are a population of 38,000. There is less than 1% of our population that is responsible for all of the violence that gets our city that title of being one of the most dangerous places in the world to live. One of the most dangerous places in the United States to live has been Chester, Pennsylvania. We've been in the top 10, top 20 on that list for a very long time. It's less than 1% of the population that's doing that. Now, we are finding that with the cameras that are now installed, almost our entire city is under camera. crimes are being solved, people are being arrested, and the police are watching the crimes occur on camera. Most of the time, it is POs, probation officers, parole agents who are actually doing the identification of the individuals on these tapes. So now the people in the town feel safe. Certainly, is this back in the day where, Miss Martha went and told on you, oh, you better not? Sure, Miss Martha probably was still telling, but Miss Martha fears not only what you gonna do, but what your mama gonna do and what your family gonna do and everything else. So, right now, we are stuck with cameras.
Yeah, and in a number of cities around the country, they're doing these green light or blue light locations on businesses where they know that those businesses are being surveilled, and it's in a collaborative relationship between the law enforcement, be it the county sheriff's department or the city sheriff's department. Duron, your thought on that as we get ready to wrap up?
I just want to tell Tracie, my mother's name is Martha, but I know you weren't referring to her. But,
Miss Martha. Now, Duron mama gonna tell.
That's what she's gonna tell. Let me tell you. This is just not an academic conversation to me. A few months ago, my niece was murdered in the city of Detroit. Not because she was in Detroit, but because she was, she had her bachelor's. She was a class away from her master's. She's got 3 beautiful kids. She's married. She goes to a concert and comes back home or drops her friends off, and a guy has a problem with people being parked in his driveway. He comes out a veteran who had a health check done on him before, and they took his weapons, but he got them back. Brought an AK-47 out and shot 8 people, and he hit her a couple times inside a parked car. And while her friend was trying to drive her to the hospital, he hit him in the back, and they both died 2 lights away. So this is a complex issue, and I know and look, everyone turned him in, so he's in jail now. But she's still gone. Our family's still grieving the loss of someone who was an extreme contributor to this society. So the issue of guns, and so when I talk policy, I don't want to divorce it from what's happening in the community, because it's impacted me. Same streets I grew up in, was able to to help transform and make it out. But we have to deal with the issue of access to guns. Crazy people are all over the country. All over the world, not crazy, but people that are mentally deranged. But they just don't kill people at the level they're killing them in America. And if we can't deal with it, we've allowed the 13 states to govern our policy in inner cities, where we know New York's now getting their hands tied behind their back, not for stop and frisk, but for just dealing with gun issues, because now it's constitutional carry, so-called. So I just think it's a broader issue. Yes, ma'am.
But Duron, is the issue guns, or is the issue violence with our young people? The violence, they can be fist fighting, they can have scissors, they could take a knife to school, and they could be stabbing people. Is the issue really the guns, or is it just why are these young people so angry that they are so violent? It's just the violence. It's not necessarily guns. It could be a screwdriver.
Remember this, Tracie. It was a few months ago, someone went on a killing spree in Canada with a knife. But guess how many people they killed? They only killed 2 people. They stabbed other people, and those people died. Death is important. But what if that person had an AK? The mass injury would be a lot greater.
But I think Tracie, what she's saying
is so much greater. I agree with you, though. I just think that the access to weapons creates so much more carnage. And with the AR-13 and the AK, you just get that bullet flips through the body and just creates damage that's unrepairable. So I agree with you.
But I think what we're talking about too is the action that causes the reaction.
Yes.
What is the action? The action is the behavior. The reaction is whatever form you use, because you get into the right situation, 2 hands could kill a person if they're angry enough. It's the action that causes the reaction. Both Tracie, Duron, I'm not sure about you. I'm sure that you can relate, though. Bilal, and I'll come to you because I know that you're in the court each and every week. And unfortunately, I believe each of us could probably talk about how our families have been impacted by gun violence, because the guy with the gun on the street is not the guy in the courtroom. Let me be real clear. If you want to see somebody who think they tough because they carrying a gun, wait until they get before a judge. They got the pastor from the church that they convinced to come and write a letter. The mama who ain't never been to the church is sitting there and he-heeing and ha-haing after their son or dad or whoever it is sent somebody to the cemetery. You see how vulnerable they are once they're standing in a courtroom, which I don't think we talk about enough. The behavior post getting arrested, it does not seem like a reality for a lot of people until they are arrested, sitting in that jail cell and knowing that the rest of their life could be spent in the penitentiary. I've seen grown men fall to their knees after shooting 2 or 3 people, 4 people, and they tough Joe Blow on the street. And they get before that judge and they are on their knees because the judge says you're going to prison for the rest of your life. But Bilal, your comment on that just from what you see in the courtroom.
Well, I haven't been in the courtroom in a long time, but I mean, I'm in the Juvenile Justice Center. But a couple of things quickly, what Tracie was talking about. The guns are the major factor we got to address. I mean, so I agree, because what you mentioned about guys, and these guys are punks. Excuse my expression. They don't have the heart. They don't even fight no more. They don't have fist fights no more. And they tell you they're afraid. They're afraid. So the guns, if it was less guns, there would be less shootings in America. Let's say that. I mean, that's a debatable subject with a lot of people. But if it was less, going to be less shooting. But getting back to the point you're raising, Frank, it's really the mindset. It really is the mindset. How do we change the thinking of Black folks in particular about how they value life and how they are raised in their behavior? So it really gets down. I keep saying this. It's the mindset, and it's about what I always say. Once again, ownership. Black community takes ownership of the problems. Every time we take an ownership of the problems, even nationally, we have improved that problem. City of Philadelphia in the 60s and the 70s, we had a gang problem. We organized collectively together the Black community. In 1970, there was 0 gang deaths from shootings in the city of Philadelphia because we took that on as an issue. We didn't care. The police were our enemies back then, really were our enemies. They would help create shootings in neighborhoods back then with the gang. So when we didn't have political representation, we organized, we did political conventions and all that. We organized, we elected Black to office. So I'm a big believer on ownership, responsibility in the Black community. And we got to take this on now. I was saying it's not a quick fix.
Yeah, Bilal, let me ask you as we get ready to close, and I said that, and we really do, but and especially because you are on the ground and have been just a stalwart in the community about trying to bring positivity to communities that could even benefit around the country. But do you believe that what happened in the 60s, 70s, or the 70s, and even the early 80s, and the civil rights movement, there has to be a shift? So we're talking about getting back to something, because in the 70s, that wasn't social media. A lot of these beefs are about what somebody disrespected somebody on social media. Who said this? A lot of them are retaliatory kinds of crimes that are being committed because you got my guy, I got to now get your guy. You got my brother, now I got to get your aunt. So social media plays a major part in a lot of these crimes. Before, it used to be about who owned what corner. The beefs they're having now are about carjacking, stealing, and the like. Spoke with some folk from the federal government recently, talking about the number of now catalytic converters that are being stolen from cars across the country, carjacking of cars and the like. It's one thing to catch the carjackers and the people that are stealing the catalytic converters, but you've got to aggressively go after the individuals that are requesting to buy them. They have to be treated as aggressively as the kids, because one of the things that was mentioned in a conversation I had with someone who is in law enforcement is how aggressively they're going after these young people, and they're specifically going after young people under the age of 16 and 17 because they're less likely to be prosecuted as aggressively as people who are 18 and over. But listen, if there was it's supply and demand. If there was not a demand for them, you have to also prosecute and persecute publicly those organizations and individuals who are asking these young people get a car. That's it right here on a major waterway. These cars are going on ships and being shipped overseas. So these cars that are being carjacked are not just about joyriding, which a lot of people would like to think that they are. A lot of these vehicles that are being stolen across the country are being shipped overseas. Who are the people that are doing that? If there was no supply, there'd be no. If there was no demand, then there would not be this kind of crime happening in the community. But with that said, Bilal, should there be a shift with social media, the access to guns that was different in the 1970s and the 1980s, that we can't approach it the same way in 2022?
No, you're correct. We got to have a new strategy. We have to have a new strategy. We got to tell our own narrative, do more positive stuff. Tracie just mentioned something that's very interesting when she was talking about Chester. They're changing that in Chester, the behavior, and but it's not being told. That story's not being told. Who's got to tell it? We got to tell it. We got to change the narrative. All kids are not bad. We know that. But we painted the kids, particularly black kids and Latino kids of color that, majority are bad. That's how come you got people walking down the street and they see kids, they walk across the street instead of walking past and say to those kids, hey, how are y'all doing? You okay? Do you need anything? Have that kind of conversation. We got to change the shift. We got to shift the change of behavior. It's really about mindset, how you think about yourself and how you think about those folks around you.
And I got to tell you, as a black woman in America driving down the street,
we got to do. And quickly, we got to have, I'm calling for a national campaign around healing. We're hurting as a people.
That's right.
Yeah.
So we need therapists galore. I think you were saying your daughter's getting ready to become a therapist.
She is one. We're just waiting for her to become national when she gets her.
We need a whole person.
Yeah.
We need a whole bunch. Seriously, because if you hurt, what's that old saying? Hurt people hurt people.
Right.
It's all about what your mindset is. That's what you listen. Now, the old traditional civil rights groups and all that, they ain't there.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm going to get in trouble for that, but I don't care.
Don't worry about it. We got your back.
They're not there. We got to think different. A young guy told me last week in a session when we were talking about some of this stuff we're talking about now. Oh, he looked at me and said, hey, this is 2022. He said it to me. This is 2022. Almost like, oh, here, you talking that dumb stuff. That ain't what's going on now with me and stuff like that. And it hit me because he's right. What is our strategy moving forward? One of the things I think we got to do clearly, we got to be pushing more positive messages. We got to be and we got to challenge. Look, social media folks closed down Donald Trump. Remember?
Mm-hmm.
Why can't social media close down the drill music and other negative music that's promoting violence? They did it for
not
Trump.
only the music,
they do it for
not only the music, but the messages. They watch the kids fighting.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. That's
They
right.
watch the kids fighting, sending messages to each other. Meet me at this spot.
That's
How
right.
in the world it is we can't stop that
Right.
is beyond me. I'm with Mr. Qayyum on that.
Yeah, but Mr. Qayyum brought up a point, and it's the responsibility. You are a stalwart for the civil rights movement and our people. But there's a chain link that in the past has been broken. I don't know how old you are, and we won't state your age. But I'm in between.
76 in 2 days.
It's a blessing. It's a blessing.
That's a blessing.
I'll be 60. This
Young boy.
Yes, sir. Thank you. I accept that. But there's a chain link because the community, I grew up, I'm an 80s child when I grew up, and, rap was emerging during that era. There's a conversation that I can have to bridge the intelligence of your conversation with the young people of today, or at least for me with the 40-year-olds. There's a chain link that has to be put back together, because what happens so often is the young guys say, hey, you can't hear me. You don't know what I'm talking about. Times have changed. But guess what? They ain't changed so drastically that I can't remember them. And they surely hasn't changed so drastically that a 40-year-old can't remember them. So miss us on that change stuff. This is a mentality. They believe in YOLO. You only live once. Let's do what we want to do and forget the rules, because their leaders, politicians like a Donald Trump, says whatever means necessary. This mentality is an ethos. It gets through our society. To every action there's an equal and opposite reaction, the laws of physics. And I'm saying to you, your message is important, But people of my age and my age group have got to carry that message. Men and women carry that message to the group that hears us. You know, I remember, I just got to say this, I remember someone telling me, oh man, these kids are bad. They're doing drugs and they're this, that, and this is so terrible. Well, are we forgetting about free love in the 70s? Are we forgetting about, we lost a great deal of our jazz artists off of heroin? I mean, are we forgetting the past? We gotta say, okay, you know what? We understand, which is the reason we can have this communication with you, is because we understand. So.
And you know, people commit violence in communities where they live, whether you be black, whether you be Hispanic, whether you be white. People commit crimes in the communities and around the people where they live. My only thing is that there's been a shift in the balance, and I think that there's an issue because if you look at over the last year and really 3 years post COVID, Tracie, I'll come to you in a second. You know, even the stresses of how men are dealing with the stress of COVID and deal with stresses in particular. Because when you look at what happened in Texas, when you look at, you know, the gun violence that has happened in other communities where they be they black, be they white, we talk about our communities because they're people that are black. The majority of these people that are walking into workplaces and shooting up folk, the majority of these individuals are men. How are men dealing with those stresses? And Bilal, to your response is something I was talking to my daughter and a couple of other people who are in her circle, is that for the black community and making mental health services available to them. Therefore, black people, they're looking at creating two different types of therapies, right? So the mental health therapist, which is what she is, more than qualified and certified, and meeting with them because people believe, okay, I'm depressed, I'm suicidal, the traditional ways that people look at therapy, but also for therapists to have a conversation about being a coach, because to be your life coach, I feel more comfortable saying, oh, I've got a life coach than saying I have a therapist.
That's right.
So they're looking at even the titles and terms to be able to offer those kinds of services. And I've said to friends of mine who are sheriffs around the country, you know, we can't keep locking up people with mental health issues. And Duron, you know, in Michigan and here, even in the state of Pennsylvania and around the country and other states around the country where they close community mental health facilities. You know, and then you want to know why people are doing things on the street. And our prisons have become mental health facilities. If we always talk about what it is we need to do to provide mental health, but the federal government and other agencies and states don't put services and money behind mental health opportunities for people that need it in the community. And we all know the conversation about not having health care. If you don't have health care, you can't even get on the phone and say, I need some mental health treatment. So Tracie, I'm going to come to you, then Duron to you, and closing comments from Bilal as we get ready to wrap up. Go, Tracie.
In my practice, Frankie, I represent many young men who are charged as adults. They are, 14, 15, and they commit, sometimes it's even been homicide, and they're charged as adults for those offenses. So they face their penalty in the adult court. Frankie, always what I do with those offenders, what I do with those young men is I have every last one of them tested. I have every last one of them tested to figure out where it is they are functioning intellectually, and where they are functioning developmentally. Mr. Qayyum made a point about, getting into the schools and doing something. However, guys, guess what? 14 and 15, it's too late. What I am consistently finding in the educational testing that I have done with my clients is that they are functioning somewhere between a 4th and 5th grade level. So it's somewhere between 4th and 5th grade that they lose their interest in education, that they lose their interest in, what's positive. And when I talk to these young men, what I found out, and this is from the ones, that's when they actually have a memory. That's when they can remember. That's when they become aware of their environment and what's going on. That's when they realize what's going on in the home. And so many of them have told me that it just wasn't at home for them. So when we're talking about a healing, we got to start in the home. We really need to go in and see what kind of home environments these children are living in. So many times these young men tell me that, their friends in the street, that's who they listening to, because that's who they think is their family, because that's who they think they get love from. And they are following the example of the people that they think they get love from. So many times they don't think they're getting love at home, because they're not getting love at home. They go to school and act up. So while there are mentors, there are resources, and there are possibilities for positive interaction for them at school, because of what's trickling over from home, they get negative interactions at school.
Some people
as well.
refer to that as a generational curse. I mean, unfortunately,
Absolutely.
for some people, it's who you're born to. Duron, your comment.
Right, Tracie, you're. I could just say amen to everything you said. Positive structure. So structure got me out of the East Side. When half of the guys I graduated with are no longer on this earth, it was. I didn't have a perfect home. I had a structured home, so that allowed me to play structured football and become successful at that. That allowed me to go to the Navy, work at the Chicago Board of Trades, and move on and spend 29 years to get a pension. Structure. That structure was never perfect, but it was always set. These young men have no structure. And their fathers are fighting structure. Their mothers are fighting. See, structure, positive structure, not just any structure, is important, because people have to have something to live for. It can't be YOLO. It can't be just you only live once, let's do what the heck we want to do. And if I had to say two things, Frankie, and I just November 8th is the election. That's one structure. I went over to South Africa. I was a part of a union group for Nelson Mandela and de Klerk's first election. I watched older people stand in line for 3 days at 80 and 90 years old in the heat to vote in that election, because it was that important to them. For no reason should our people not show up for the polls. I don't want to hear about, it's this subject, the politician didn't come to me. Your life counts on your vote. You have no complaint if you choose to stay at home. That's one issue. Number two, you talking about next time to have a conversation? Well, Congressional Black Caucus just passed its 51st annual legislative conference. There is no other period of time in this country where Black folks of all intellectual groups, including young people, business starts, come together. But here in D.C., they just finished it today. What are we going to talk about next year? And hopefully it don't take a year, but what are we going to talk about next year?
But did they talk about the gun violence this year? Just have that.
They talk, but is that going to get covered? What's going to get covered out of that? They got to keep telling their story more, because yes, there was large sessions on gun violence, but that discussion has to be amplified.
Correct. And what we're talking about, because we're talking about policymakers at a federal level. So if they're talking about it, what happens when the conference, what happens when the workshop is over, or the seminar is over. Past that, everybody goes up to the party and never takes nothing back to the community.
Here. This is the Council of Mayors here. You have all those city council members. The entire city council of Detroit is there near here. So the entire conversation is fulcrum, but I just think it has to be followed up with, and that message is important. So I'm just saying that we have to get off our backs. I've always been a person of action. I'm a glass half full guy. I like to look at things bad, but I used to look at the good things too. Yeah. There's a lot of young kids that came here to do right. There's a lot of kids who's figuring it out, and we don't talk about them enough, because all we talk about is the knuckleheads. So after a while, if only thing you talk about is the knuckleheads,
that's all you see.
Knuckleheads.
Yeah. And on the federal level, you talked about voting. It's interesting where people say that they don't want to vote, but those are some of the same people who rushed to get the PPP loan. Those are the same people when the federal government, was giving out checks during the during COVID, and they were wondering where their check was. You need to be as aggressive when you talk about I don't vote and the voting means nothing, but you are on the phone trying to call a tax guy to figure out where your check was by. All right. So, Bilal, with your wisdom, happy Earth Day to you again as we celebrate you and all the work that you've done. Incredible activist, incredible artist. We'll get you back on the show. I love your vision. I love your insight. And definitely thank you again for being here. It won't be your last time. I hope that you will agree to come back. Your closing comments, close with your wisdom.
Quickly, is what Tracie said. Something has not changed since man and women came on this earth, and that is love. Everybody wants to be loved. Think about that. Everybody wants to be loved. So if you love and we're pushing love, that is going to be a major change. Now, people talk about, flower children, all that kind of stuff, but that's real. Everybody, I don't know a person that doesn't want to be loved. That's a natural feeling that everyone has. So we got to push it. And like we've been saying, everybody's kind of saying, we got to change the narrative. We really do. I'll be hopefully, and I say hopefully, I will be married with my wife December 2nd, I'm sorry, for 39 years.
Amen.
And I'm pushing, which is a good friend of mine from Washington, D.C., name is Nisa Muhammad. For the last 17 years, he's been pushing Black Marriage Day. So we did a Black Marriage Day in the city of Philadelphia a couple of years before the COVID. We're going to do one next year. It's the third Sunday in March. So I'm pushing marriage. It's like the brothers are talking about structure. That stuff, I don't care what, the heck with the social media, everything else. If we don't have a structure, then that's what's creating a lot of confusion in our neighborhood. And the last thing Tracie said too was great was kids learn. There's a national study that showed that kids at the third grade level in America now are reading, 60% of them are reading not at the third grade level, even though they're in the third grade. So we got to change that mindset I've been talking about from the time they're in daycare. Because there's a loss between the time they're in daycare to the time they get to schools. And a friend of mine even raised that issue with me. He said he goes into daycare, so he's an insurance agency. And he said, Bilal, the kids, when they say time to eat, they're all time to eat, they're all at the table, whatever the snack they're eating. If they say you got to go take your nap, he said, Bilal, what changes from, and it was an interesting conversation. He said, what changes from those kids who are in daycare center once they get into the public schools? So that's why I said we got to start at a younger age. We got to start backward. And the most important thing I want to end with, we got to change the narrative of our community. We're pushing more positive images than the negative images. Because all our young folks are seeing, not all, but they're concentrating on because they're seeing negative images through social media, through the rap music, and even the communities and the families they're in. That's our challenge as a people. America's going into another direction that I don't want to support. America's going towards that direction of not people being married. They're actually pushing in America, don't be married.
Mm-hmm.
Which to me, it's insane because every society, doesn't matter if it's communism, socialism, democratic, Islamic, Christian, whatever it is, every society is built on one thing: families. Families.
Great.
That's where societies come from. So
thank you so much. And Bilal, when you get ready to do the marriage day, definitely let me know and I'll support it. I'll definitely put the message out there. I am not married. I probably won't attend. I want to go where there are unmarried people.
We'll find your husband.
Yeah. I want to go where there are single and available, because you can be single and not be available. But I will definitely help to push that married narrative. I'm not going to crack a joke. I have several I want to let loose right now, but I'll definitely, I definitely will do that and absolutely agree. The structure is the key. To each and every one of you, Bilal, Qayyum, Duron, Marshall, Tracie Burns, I thank you so much for joining me. And for you, wherever you watch your podcast, iHeartRadio Network, the Real Times Media. Thank you so much to the Black Information Network. My name is Frankie Darcell. Check us out wherever you watch your podcasts.
Thank you for joining us for this edition of Frankie Has a Big Mouth. Find us on the iHeartRadio app, the Black Information Network, Real Times Media, or wherever you get your podcast. We'll see you next time for more compelling conversations.